All right, we're rocking and rolling. I've learned from my previous technological blunders. I don't know how to prevent it double posting the link, but anyhow. All right, I have some time this week, and I have some thoughts as usual. And so I wanted to do a few live streams, and hopefully we'll see if some people can show up. So I had this question. I'll just start by giving the context, I guess. So a few weeks ago, I went to an Illumin conference, which, for those of you that don't know, also preface, I think we're safe because I'm on Grail Country in my own channel, but I was just going to give context, but then every time I give context, my consciousness Congress I have all these multiple voices playing in my head, and I was thinking, if I give the context of this conference and its origins, then will people judge it and zone out and not hear what I'm saying? Uh, Hopefully not. Judgment too harsh of judgment, too much of the right hand of God can close you off to your becoming. Let's say it that way. So a few weeks ago, I was at this conference. The organization is called Illuminating Men, and it is a organization that is pretty young in its infancy, but it's grown out of Richard Rohr, the teaching of Richard Rohr, and it's men's work essentially. And so this is my first. I have a good friend, who has done some previous stuff with Illumin. I have a couple friends actually who have, and so I was vaguely familiar with it, but this was the first time I went to a conference. So I went to this conference, and one of the things that they do is they do one of the parts of the conference, and this is more of the core of what Illumin does, is it's a men's group. It's a spiritual men's group, although it kind of has a spirituality of AA. It's the God of your understanding, or it's a God without any sort of doctrinal lines, so as to not impose and kind of colonize. It's not too emergent. It's not too heavy on the emergence versus, or the emanating. Sorry, got that backwards. Versus the emergence. So it allows your becoming. It doesn't tell you what to think about God. It just creates a space. Okay, mute my phone. It just creates a space where you can have some spirituality. Because there's other men's groups that do men's work that don't have spirituality attached, but this one does. So, and it's also kind of Catholic, although, for lack of a better term, liberal Catholic, roar, whatever. But what's great about it is one of the central rituals, I would say, of this group is they have what's called a council. And the council is where these groups of men create this atmosphere of intimacy. There's usually like some ceremonial entering into a circle, and like the circle that I did, I'll just speak from my experience because that's what I know. We had a ceremonial talking stick, which was this stick that had a history and a story, or it can be something and so like whoever would have the stick, you put the stick in the center. There's maybe a candle, there's maybe a bowl, there's some decoration, there's some beauty you put there, and then there's maybe a prompt. They start off with some prompts. And then there's some parameters, some rules of what these councils are supposed to do. And then whoever feels the urge or the inspiration to speak, the call to speak, they'll grab the stick. And the reason they grab the stick is because the person with the stick is the only one that talks. No one else is allowed to talk without the stick. And so the person and then there's some rules. So some of the rules, and I've only been a part of this, or like I only went to this one council, so I don't remember them all really well. One of the rules is no crosstalk, which I think is pretty similar to AA. It's like when the person's talking, you don't get to ask questions or challenge or any of that stuff. Just the other person talks. You're also supposed to be, I think they call it, uh, uh, what's the term they use? Essentially, you're supposed to have brevity or shortness of speech or something like that, which is essentially like get to the point. Because the point is with this is to talk from the heart. It's not really a group about ideas. You're not in there talking about intellectual concepts. You're not talking about books you've read. You're not talking about politics. You're not talking about whatever. You're not talking about superficial stuff. You're talking about heart level stuff. So it's get to the point. So the illustration, the guy who was talking about that, trying to illustrate it, said, you know, you could talk about family histories. You could say this happened and that happened, but the point is, I'm pissed off at my brother, you know, and you're supposed to say that. So I went there and we did these councils over the course of the weekend. We had about 5 councils, and it was profound. Like it was a very profound experience. A lot of these men that I did this council with, I think probably told me some of the most intimate, vulnerable, shamed, hidden, perhaps usually hidden things of their lives, you know. And part of it too is like I'm not, you know, what happens in the circle stays in the circle, and so the council, and so that's another thing that creates the vulnerability of the space, the openness of the space. There's no judgment. You can't say anything about the space. Like it's a sacred space, and so. Man, there's a lot that I could just say about that experience and men's work and how that resonated with me and what I loved. Yeah, Nate, get in here, you beautiful bastard.
Good morning.
Nice. Glad you could make it, dude. Long time no see, and
Yeah, let me adjust my volume here. This is the first time I've ever done this on my iPad. I got an iPad for the remote player for my D&D game.
Yeah.
And that allows me to continue to, with the iPad, I can continue to redact.
Oh, you got to keep redacting.
It's not actually, I have 15 minutes before I start work.
So. Okay, so this is good because let me get through this quick, and then I want to hear your thoughts since you're here. So I did this whole ritual. I don't know how much of that you heard. This with Illumin, the council, and but then coupled with that whole event, there were a few times when all the men of the event were together, which I don't know, there's like 200 or 300 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And part of the conference was this is flipping fantastic. It was a riff off of this Merton quote, which I should go find this shirt from Hagia Sophia, which is like one of the coolest things. It's such a great quote, which is essentially about the hidden wholeness at the core of everyone. It's really, really beautiful. And so it's like the conference was recovering our hidden wholeness. And part of that was this deep connection to nature. We had an indigenous leader who was there, Doug Goodfeather, who was speaking at the conference. But then, so there was
a, you know, speaking of that hidden wholeness, let me see if I can find it. There was a Jordan Daniel Wood dropped on Facebook this morning. Or maybe it was last night, actually.
Oh, you mean my future best friend?
But he dropped, yeah, right here. I found it. Okay. So this is the quote that he dropped. I think it was like last night. Yeah, 21 hours ago. So yesterday.
Okay.
This principle, logos, this is, he's actually quoting Maximus here, expressly teaches us just this. The word of God is complete in nature and essence, so that he is identical and consubstantial with the Father and the Spirit, and he is complete in person and hypostasis. And so that he proves to be different from the Father and the Spirit, preserving his personal distinction. He became wholly incarnate of the Holy Spirit and the Holy Theotokos and ever Virgin Mary. He became a complete human being. In other words, by the assumption of flesh, possessing an intellectual and rational soul, a flesh that received both its nature and hypostasis in him, i.e., it received both its to be and its to subsist instantaneously in the Word's conception. For certainly the Word himself stands in place of the seed. Or better, in his willing he was found to be the seed of his own incarnation and became composed according to hypostasis. The very one who is simple and not composed according to nature. He remains one and the same in the permanent fixity of the parts of which he is composed, unchangeably, indivisibly, unconfusedly. so that he might be, in his own hypostasis, the mediator for those parts out of which he is composed, joining together in himself the interval between the extremes, making peace and completely reconciling human nature to God the Father through the Spirit.
Jeez, what an ugly theology.
Which is exactly what you're talking. That's the internal wholeness that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's it.
Why this conference was so great. So I do want to talk about ritual. I do want to talk about the ideas, but to wrap up the hidden wholeness, deep, intimate part of the councils that I loved about this conference, and that I'm trying to figure out how to continue and integrate and work out in my own life, because part of it is a remedy for POS theology, to be frank, is that stuff is the hardest for me, really. Like when I start talking about that stuff at like the not intellectual level, like the kind of level the councils are getting at, I almost instantly cry, because there's just like I've built up some really big and strong gatekeepers. Somebody in my estuary was talking about this language of this current mode of psychoanalysis or therapy about, I have these gatekeepers that guard like these deepest wounds of my existential being.
As you can see there from that quote, it's like the part about bringing peace is really, really key, because as long as we're resisting that wholeness, that we can't have peace, and we're at war in ourselves.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah. This is like, yeah.
So
I get it. That's my life.
That's everyone's. That's everyone's life. We're all struggling to get to that place.
Yes. Well, and that's part of. So that series that I promoted in the last live stream with Jordan Daniel Wood, he talks about that really beautifully with this tension in the third part, where he's talking about Calvinism and determinism and free will and this relationship of like, I think I clipped it somewhere.
That conversation, I haven't seen it yet. Was that was the one that he had with a former student, I think?
So I don't. The guy's name is John. It's Mystery and Reason, I think, is his channel. But it's like he must have like he doesn't have a pro Zoom account, so it's split up into 4 parts.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's.
Jordan
I put
is
the
so
links
awesome
in the description.
In his willingness to talk to people, by the way.
Yeah,
he's like super available and super generous with his time.
Well, and also I think a lot of people who could have the kind of technical conversations with him, I think don't, because I think they don't have the courage somewhat to maybe go to the places that Jordan goes, and or they don't understand what he's saying. Because like I try to tell, this is how I always feel about, this is why I want to hook him up with Peter Rollins, because I just think most people don't understand Peter Rollins.
That's actually
either.
a genius idea, because Rollins is very, very Hegelian, and Jordan is kind of infamous for being an accidental Hegelian, right? Because he'd never even read, when people started saying that his reading of Maximus was Hegelian, he actually hadn't read Hegel. Yeah, so he went and read Hegel after he kept hearing the same critique over and over again from various quarters.
Well, that's hilarious, because that kind of thing happens to me all the time, because you know me, I'm not super well read and all those things, just enough to be able to communicate, and people will be like, you're very Spinozian, and I'm just like, oh, cool. All right. Whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to get your thoughts about this before you leave. So this conference, they have Recovering Your Hidden Wholeness. They have these 4 elements: so wind, fire, earth, spirit, breath. Spirit, not wind. Spirit and wind were separate. Fire, earth, and so they have all these things. But then, because they're wise enough to understand, like, you can't just do all this in your head. You can't be merely Gnostic. They have rituals at the beginning of all these ceremonies. They had rituals, and and there's part of me that like understand that and loved it, but like they were also weird as shit. Like they were weird, you know? Like they were. What I don't want to disparage it, because like I love the thing, but it was weird.
Yeah. Well,
so then this leads me to the point, though, is like, as an American, as a Westerner, as the melting pot culture, the cultureless culture,
yeah,
like as me, who has no ethnic heritage, which is why I labeled this like I thought like this is LARPing, and then I thought, well, my conversion to Orthodoxy is kind of LARPing. Like that's not my culture.
Right.
So like, so part of that is like, what
So
is
you
America?
didn't go to
What
the
are,
Chino conference, did you? You didn't go to the
no.
Chino conference, but Pajot said something that I was actually like really glad to hear him say. It was actually quite Barfieldian. It was the most
Okay.
Barfieldian thing I've ever heard him say. But he was kind of like acknowledging the fact that like Westerners like being Orthodox is kind of a LARP.
Yeah, totally.
But he was indicating that like in our moment in history, like the only way back to participation is through a LARP. Like it's like final participation is a hypostatic form of participation, which means it has to be willed. It has to be a conscious choice. So
it's a fake
that,
it till you make
so,
it.
So in some ways that has to begin as a LARP.
Right, because to some degree, right, like, what am I going to do? Like, what are you going to do as American? What is our culture? Like, what am I going to participate in? Just like endless consumerism and like colonizing everyone to our radical liberalism?
I
like
love my
is that our
Orthodox
culture?
friends, but I think that, I mean, for me, it's like we're English speakers, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there is like a deep the Anglo-Catholic tradition has its own deep English language roots and traditions. So that's why I'm over in the Anglican camp myself. But is it any less of a LARP though? I don't think it's less of a LARP just because you stick with something that is like more rooted in the traditions of your language.
All of your fans and this channel's fans that are like Renaissance Festival people are like, LARPing's cool, Luke.
Yeah.
Stop being a dick.
Yeah.
Paul,
No Mormon.
I mean, maybe. The more like we've talked about this before with Tyler, and the more what I used to disparage in Mormon theology as being like super weird, I'm just like, maybe they nailed it with like the whole like ruling over planets and stuff.
Oh yeah. Mormon theology is a mixture of like very, very bizarrely insightful things and just stuff that's just weird. It's a mixed bag. But you know what? I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't really like, I mean, this is going to sound really dumb and evangelical, but I don't know how, but this is how I really feel about it. So I'm going to put it this way. It's like, do you think Jesus is groovy? Like, is Jesus the lens through which you look at reality? If the answer to that question is yes, then you're on my team. And I don't care about the specifics of your theology beyond that. It's like, okay, it's like if you think Jesus is groovy, then I think you're groovy.
Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, I guess it's more hippie than evangelical, but hey, I'm adjacent to both of those things. They're just inevitably so.
So this is something else I was thinking. I think you're right. There is no neutrality. You have to choose. You can't sit it out. Like whatever. I mean, Jordan also said that in that series. Is essentially this is where he was poking fun at, or he wasn't poking fun. Jordan has a way of speaking this.
Have you been following our meditations on the Divine Comedy series at all?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that was like one of the recent episodes that we did. It was like it was like they were at, we were at the sort of like the outskirts of hell, where you had the people who wouldn't decide, the people who wouldn't decide for one side or another, that they're forever chasing after their banner.
Yeah, right? And everyone hated them, even the people in hell. They're like,
yeah, exactly. Neither hell nor heaven wanted them. Yeah.
The lukewarm, hot or cold, or I'll spew you out, man. Yeah. It also reminds me of East of Eden is one of those books that like it's one of the only pieces of art that I've ever read or watched or taken part in that took my breath away. Like there was a part in the book where I just like this has happened to me at two different pieces of three things in art where like I stopped, like that thing happened to me, like I couldn't breathe. And but that book, the main idea of it is like the Tim shell, he mayest, like that's the thing of the book. Like that's what it's about, told through this multi-generational story, and like one of the most like this is where like when Paul talks about heaven and getting to like meet everyone and have conversations with them, like Steinbeck. When I got to know that book, I was like, who is this person? Like I need to hang out with this guy. It's unbelievable. Like it floored me so much.
Yeah. Hey,
So yeah, sorry.
maybe you can get some other folks in here. I saw Paul make a comment. I said, Sharon, maybe some other folks can jump in here. I gotta go to work now, so I'm gonna have to leave. But it was good to get to talk to you for a little bit this morning.
It's lovely.
I've been so busy with work, I haven't been able to talk to you all as much as I would like. So it's good to connect this morning.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
Yeah,
I'm going to turn the stream back on and listen while I'm working.
Nice, cool. Well, we'll see how long I can keep it rolling.
All right.
Peace.
Yep.
I will put I'll recopy the link here. What's up, Psych? So like if I do this, it does both, whatever. I don't know how to do both. Upcycle Club, hello. Hello, Dolly. I don't think I finished it. Your conversation with Karen, though, it was lovely. I got distracted by it. Doesn't mean it wasn't awesome. It was wonderful. So I don't even know what this means. Anyhow. Phoebus, what up, G? So yeah, I don't know. That's helpful. Nate's always helpful to me with maybe that's the takeaway. There is no not LARPing. Well, okay, here's where I'll go with it until somebody else shows up, because let's go with Barfield, because I love Barfield, and I don't know if he's posted it yet, but I just had a talk with Mourning Talk, which is a wonderful channel to check out, about. Sorry, I'm blanking on your name. I don't even know your first name. This is the weird internet thing. It's like I know your handles and not your first name. A wook is an especially dirty hippie. Aren't they all? So Barfield, I had a conversation with him about Barfield and Saving the Appearances, because that book, at the beginning of this little corner of the internet, at least in my involvement with it, that's one of the first things I ever said to PVK was, this book is like one of the books, and it's definitely on my Mount Rushmore of books people should read in trying to understand what's going on, although it's hard to understand. But the evolution of consciousness piece is, I think, this is for a long time, growing up in the West, being disenfranchised with evangelicalism, not really losing my faith, deconstructing, but deconstructing my faith as I, Aaron Parker, correct. Thank you, Nate. I became, I definitely deconstructed my egoic understandings of my faith, and kind of this the closed circle doctrinal confessional understandings of my faith. And that started with the doctrine of hell for me, which I've talked about a lot. It's basically when I was exposed to annihilationism, and I was a convinced sola scriptura Protestant, and I was just like, whoa. Eternal conscious hell is not the biblical high scripture view. And that just sent me into this tail. I don't know. It was, for a lot of people, I think it would have been very uncomfortable. For me, who's like very high in openness, like I'm comfortable in the chaos. I like the chaos. Too much structure and too much organization freaks me out. I like Peter Rollins. I like post-structuralism. I like, in as much as I understand what all that is, I'm so loosely connected to ideas and definitions that I use them and I don't even know what they mean. That's why people are like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, this is probably not going to help our conversation, giving you a definition. And that's why I think I made a post on my own channel, or a video, about how definitional understandings are not real understandings. Anyhow, I think it leads to babble. But so in the evolution of consciousness thing, circling back, I think this has been said a couple times really well recently, but I would almost argue that a lot of Eastern consciousness at large, and most Eastern religions did not have a highly enough developed or specific or evolved understanding of the self or the individual or the person. Like most people don't like they're too, and I'm using some of these terms loosely because these are Western terms. I think they're too group centered. They're too collectivist. They're too group thinky. But like groupthink is something that evolved in the West, where it's like almost a like I think when Orwell is talking about groupthink, it's a different thing than what I'm talking about. It's just like you think of everything in terms of the tribe, the family. You think of it in terms of spiral dynamics. It's like the tribal consciousness, and and I think within Christianity and probably other religious traditions, I'm sure this happened. It probably is happened and has happened. And Jewish folks like my boy Chezi or Yosef could speak to this better in like Jewish things, or I'm sure it's happened in Islamic traditions too. Is like there's been this evolution though of the self to its extreme version is what I call um, the autonomous, isolated individual. I'm going to post some comments here in a little bit, but I'm trying to just get through this thought quickly. And so you have the individual, which I equate with basically Antichrist, and then you have Christ, which is like the real person, the true human being, the Christ, the only existent one, as we say, and during the whole lead up to in Holy Week in the Orthodox Church. And and so I've come to think, even though I fell in love with Orthodoxy and I love Eastern Christianity, and the theology that's over there just isn't jacked because it's not piece of shit theology. It's not like it doesn't have these particular Augustinian, which also Paul. You should watch that Jordan Daniel Wood series because he, like a lot of things I post to you, will dismantle and disabuse you of your understandings of Calvinism. Like there are parts of it that true. You could take the good and spit out the bones, which Calvinism largely doesn't do. But so so this evolution didn't happen in the East, and I think what's happening in the West is like we had that fall, we had that isolated individual, we have nihilism, we have the death of God, but that I think is necessary for the evolution of consciousness. Like I think the evolution of consciousness. I'll send it to you, Paul. It's this Jordan Daniel Wood conversation is broken up into 4 parts. The link is in the last live stream that I did yesterday or whatever on Grail Country. So anyhow, so that's all to say. Like I think I'm gonna put some comments in here. I think this is what is America? Larping Orthodoxy in America. What is American Orthodoxy going to be and become? I don't know. It definitely can't be like I remember there was a conversation with Peugeot and some other Orthodox artists and sculptors and things. I can't remember all the people's names in there, but they talked about that. Like there can be this kind of historicist, restorationist, uh, negatively conservative, backward-looking trend, hyper conservative trend in Orthodoxy that like fetishizes Byzantine art or something, or fetishizes. I mean, you could take any sort of, if you're fetishizing tradition, you're not open to the death and rebirth stuff, which is so essential for healthy religion. So, all right, I'm gonna go back and look at some comments here, and if anybody wants to jump in, okay, my boy, we got some boys here. Okay, Chezi, I'm not gonna say that. Doing something not for its own sake, one will come to do it for its own sake. Yes. Beautiful. Let's go here. As an East European, born Eastern Orthodox, I can remember all true Christians, at least since 2,000 years, find it somewhat vexing to witness how many zealous American adopters of Orthodoxy. Yeah, totally. And there's another guy in this little corner. Who was I just talking to? What's his name? Too many people. These are outside of my Dunbar number. I can't remember all these names. But he grew up Coptic Christian. What is his name? He lives in Penn, like outside of Penn State, somewhere in Pennsylvania. Anyhow, but he grew up Orthodox and then left and became evangelical, which happens a lot. And Sam has made that criticism before, and Sam and Paul have talked about that, about how Like, is Orthodoxy actually growing and retaining? Like, it's very easy, I think, in this little corner bubble to just be like, Orthodox, it's the new girl. Orthodoxy, so hot right now. I think it's very hot right now for disenfranchised evangelicals and for really radical, like the most radical Protestants in a lot of ways. The people that are so radical, the kind of people that get into Peter Rollins. That's what a local buddy told me once, and I've heard Pete say this too. Like, a lot of people assume people that are into Peter Rollins are the progressive, kind of liberal, wooey, less hardcore people, the people that actually don't care about the truth. And Rollins is like, in his experience, the people that follow his work are always like the most, like the hyper zealots. So yeah, I mean, is Orthodoxy growing in America? I don't know, because the thing is, that's what I mean. Kind of almost the original participation Orthodox, the cradle Orthodox. Um, a lot of those kids who grow up and become thoroughly Americanized, a huge percentage of them don't practice Orthodoxy, because they haven't gone through this fall. I would say this evolution of consciousness. They're not in that original mode anymore, and they've fallen, and they need to come back and recover it as their own. That type of thing. So most of them are largely unaware of the very real disappointments and challenges associated with even the Evangelical Orthodox Church, or the Eastern Orthodox Church in its native context. Yeah, totally. Yeah, they romanticize what they don't know. It's the novel thing. PVK said that to me too before. Protestantism with Byzantine paint. Yeah, or I heard too many names, too much technical stuff. An Orthodox priest who I like, who I follow, and I can't remember his name right now, but he called it Eastern Rite evangelicalism, which is a legitimate thing. So, LARP can be seen as a way of exploring the evolution of consciousness, a central theme in Owen Barfield's work. Yeah, totally. I think that's legitimate. There's something about LARPing to me that feels uncomfortable. And there's probably good and bad in that, it's just part of, I don't know. I'd have to process why that is in myself. Yes, Chezi, you've been gone for a while, my brother. And I miss you. And you are wonderful. You are loved. You are seen. That's also something else that happens a lot at this Illumin conference, where it's just like, if you really allow yourself to hear it and take it in and believe it, when people are like saying that kind of thing to you, it's waterworks. Because POS theology sucks, and it's deeply, deeply into my soul, and it's evil. All right. Let's see. What else do we got? Sherry, you say, whosoever shall fall in the stone shall be broken, but whosoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. Yeah. Can meditate on that one for a while. Okay. If you do away with the individual, you can't actually love. There has to be an I and thou, right? Yes. Well, I make a distinction between the person, which is not the isolated autonomous individual, because the individual, I said it's the antichrist. It's the false self. It's the no, instead of no thing, it's the no person. And the antithesis of that is the person. However, in light of this whole Hegelian non-duality thing, and a lot of the Maximus stuff, maybe going into the individual is the solution for a Westerner, going fully into the individual and dying. Maybe that's what you have to do to experience your own ego death or something. Christianity never actually made it to America. Oh, I think it did. What that makes me think of, though, is like silence. And because that's a constant theme in that book, which is one of the other works of art that has taken my breath away. The book did, not so much the movie, even though I loved the movie. I think Scorsese did an excellent job, and Andrew Garfield is amazing. Love him. I follow everything that dude does. Andrew? See, Andrew. Everybody knows Andrew Garfield. But with silence, because that's a theme that I forget the guy's name. I should know this because I've read the book twice and watched the movie about 4 times. But this is how untechnical I am in relationship to language. One of the persons who's essentially being the inquisitor and trying to break down the priests in the movie Silence often says that is just like he calls it the swamp. The swamp of Japan is basically just like Christianity couldn't take seed here. It killed the seed, like it's Christianity cannot take root. The swamp rotted it out. The swamp of Japan. And that's kind of what the whole book's about. Whether or not that's true. What would be the equivalent of the swamp of America? The individualism, the consumerism, but here's the thing. Sorry to bring this up. Alexander Dugin talks about in his book, The Fourth Political Theory, says that one of the strengths, which that book is basically like laying out this potential evolving fourth political theory, different than fascism, communism, and liberalism. But he says one of the strengths of liberalism, which would be the American, geopolitical thing, it has 2 poles. It's kind of this Hegelian thing. It has the Christ and Antichrist on both sides, and so one negative pole of that is individualism, extreme individualism, but the other side of that pole is freedom. Like, what does it mean? Which he mayest. Like, you got to choose. There is no escaping it. You have to actually choose. This is also why sola scriptura. I mean, maybe that's the truth of sola scriptura is you do have to choose. This is the tension or the antimony that Jordan Daniel Wood is probably talking about in his new podcast between historicism and historical criticism and then dogma. Is just like the individualistic analytical approach to what do I think about all this? What do I think about that particular doctrine? But then also a submission to, I would say you could only honestly do and authentically do to a mystical Christianity, because you couldn't do it to a confessional Christianity because a confessional Christianity is closed and wouldn't actually allow you to submit to it in an authentic way that would retain your own person. That's why it's individual collective stuff. That's why I speak against confessionalism so often. Okay, keep going. Onward. Theo Bond. Did anybody see Theo Bond talk to Vervaeke? I didn't finish it all because it was, I don't know, too contrasting of a crossover. It weirded me out. If morphic resonance is true, Sherry bringing some Sheldrake, like love it. If morphic resonance is true, American Orthodoxy will change all of Orthodoxy. Well, right. I mean, it's like it's a new crystal, right? What is it? We don't know, man. And we're on the front side of it. Because it can't just be that historical, analytical, romantic, backwards focusing restorationist, fetishizing Byzantium or whatever culture it came out of. It can't be just that. It has to be wise guy. I almost just spilled water on my computer. My wife got this for me, or one of my kids or something. Double entendre. It can't just be that. It also has to be this new thing, this becoming thing. Divine simplicity, process theism. Yes. Team Anglican. Nate still being tribal. Sweet. Sherry gets it. Team Anglican. All right. What else we got? Oriental Orthodox is up next on a micro scale, but Restorationism is still in vogue and will likely remain in vogue for the foreseeable future. Tradcath, Tradorth, Mormons, etc. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because that is the, that's the status quo. That's what's comfortable. That is the But like this is where like but this is what's happening though, I think. And you see this happening in America right now, which is happening in like most people see it in the political culture because that's the religion of America, right? One of them, probably the predominant one is it's there's so much chaos in like the post-Trump American political atmosphere. And we're even seeing that now, which is like, is he in prison? Is he going to be elected? What's happening? And then you have like RFK coming in and upsetting the apple cart from the Democratic side, or what is he? And like, which side of power? I saw RFK say that recently when he was talking to, which I love RFK, by the way. Uh, I'm an anarchist, so for me to say that I like a politician is rare. Who was the last one? Ron Paul. Um, but he said somewhere recently that like, back in the day, the Republicans were where all the money was and control and power. But like, if you look at the American political landscape now, please don't let this devolve into politics. I don't want to talk about politics really. I can if it's cool, but if it's not cool, I don't want to do it. And I will decide if it's cool. That like the most wealthy in the American political landscape in the legislative body, I think, and just in politics at large, like most of the wealth is now held by Democrats. So like which is the party of the man now, right? And the powerful and follow the money. Like who is that? Is it the Republicans or the Democrats? Well, that's all shifting because that's what with chaos and order, chaos will come in if you insist on too much order. All the trad the trad orthodoxy, the whatever. Like keep things the way it is, keep the stability, which there's wisdom in that, right? That's Chesterton's fence, out in the field. You don't just rip it down. We're not the Joker here. Also, great art. Didn't make me cry though. There's wisdom to being the ark and not the speedboat. But then like, what is American Orthodoxy? Is it like an ark with speedboats? Is it a speedboat ark? you know? Nate loves us though. Okay, what else we got? How behind am I? The cool boy in town. I appreciate the old cradle Orthodox perspective that we're getting here, Stephen. The new cool boy in town, but nobody knows how many skeletons are in the closet. Yeah, and I don't either. I only know what I know. I know Orthodoxy from a pretty limited perspective, which is reading about its theology and philosophy, reading church fathers and things, reading some books, my local parish, which is so in Minneapolis, Orthodoxy has kind of an interesting vibe, which is different than the coast. It's different than like where Sam has talked about in Chicago. Like we have a really cool pan-Orthodox, ecumenical Orthodox group. Like when I send my kids to church camps or when there's, these pan-Orthodox groups, like we all get together and get along and it's fun. And people like it's not as tribal here in Minneapolis. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. The Orthodox Church in America, I think, basically had its founding here, if I remember right. Don't fact check me there. Yes, always check out Barfield. By the way, if you want Aaron Parker on Morning Talk, so like morning, but like morning sadness, Mourning, Morning Talk channel, has been going through Saving the Appearances and reading it, which is when people do that, it's fantastic. Like Jess with Job, Yosef has done that in Hebrew. That Jess has like done, helped him out and hooked him up with some music stuff and some editing things to like read through some Psalms. I believe they did in Hebrew. It's just beautiful as hell. That's on Yosef's channel, which is like Einsof, something like that. EINSOF. Don't judge me for pronunciation. Jason, you are a beautiful man in many, many ways. James Franco. Yeah, Sherry, what? You haven't showered, you're shoveling manure, you're petting sheep. What are you doing? Get in here. It's not as important as this. I don't remember when this happened. Sounds like taking up a cross, but probably. Oh, So this line is apparently David Bentley Hart, Christianity never made it to America. Well, I disagree with you, David. If you're watching this, I think it did. Well, I agree and disagree, as is my wont. And I like to disagree with very smart people. Yeah, click like. It's great. Swamp of Japan. Jason, why does that make you think that? I don't know. That's a quote from that book. Is so good. I can't. I'm just gonna list the things, the pieces of art that have taken my breath away. Some of them I'm sure people haven't heard of because they're not very popular or well known. But the book Silence, East of Eden, and the third, I think these are the only three that have literally taken my breath away. And I'm using literally correctly there. They figuratively and literally took my breath away. And then Man Down. It's a film that was not, but Shia LaBeouf, my boy. That guy is amazing. And the film Man Down, like, oh my God, ugly crying. It was unbelievable. Just wrecked me. Like a Fire Swamp, Princess Bride. The U.S. is in its rebellious teen phase. Patience and long suffering may be in order. Yeah. Well, that's helpful to me as I essentially have 3 teenagers. Patience and long suffering. Those are like those fruits of the spirit that y'all pray for, like, Lord, give me humility, give me gentleness. But then you forget, right, that in order. PVK, you.
Hey, Luke.
Welcome. Welcome.
Here I am from puppy prison. Say hello to the puppy.
Oh, puppy.
Yeah, puppy's about to get fed in a minute. But I missed a bunch. I was listening in the shower and then I had to come out here and talk to the wife, and she just went to work. So
the freedom when the wife isn't around, you can just get online and talk to all your online friends.
Yeah, except I got this. Look.
Oh, look at him.
I want your attention.
Puppy,
I want your attention.
You can't be given attention because you're a service dog. You're to receive no love so that you can be a good soldier.
That's right. You say hi to all the people out there. Yes.
Puppy, I expected an automatic just add-on of like a bunch of views, a bunch of viewers. There's 25 now. Puppies and PVK, and it's just like boom, blow up.
There's a great video out there with Keanu Reeves, just basically a pit of puppies. That's hilarious.
That would bring puppies? People in. People love Keanu Reeves.
There you go.
All right. Well, Paul, what do you think about Christianity in America, Orthodoxy in America? What is America?
Well, what is America? That's a real good question. Now, this is all kinds of things you're not allowed to do. All right. See, this is why I don't do videos at home with the puppy, because
he jumps on you constantly.
Wrestling the puppy. But now got the puppy's food. That's going to distract her, and I can have a few minutes of think space. She's so excited. Best time of day.
So this, Christian, great comment. I love it. You had me nodding yes at quote, Christianity has never taken deep root, but then that scales both ways. I like it. So,
it's the funny thing about human beings is that we, here's the, you asked the question about LARPing, and I often answer the question with respect to why don't I become Orthodox? I'm Dutch Calvinist. Now I'm Dutch Calvinist 4 generations. what were we 5 or 6 generations ago? Were we Jews? I
How far
don't
back?
know. And which we? I mean, so I've got my father's tree, I've got my mother's tree. And one of the things, so I was just with this Korean classis, and I'm always thinking about all the things I'm thinking about. And so we start devotions, and there's we're singing this one praise and worship song in Korean, and we sing 2 hymns that are in Korean, and then they have a report from Synod, and the delegate basically goes off on the whole same-sex marriage thing, and
Yeah.
we have to, and so we as human beings are enormously colonizable. I mean, that's one of our, I'm spending all this time trying to train this dumb dog, and we can train, it's a very smart dog, but we can train dogs to an amazing degree, but we as human beings are totally renewable by the Spirit. And if there's anything that we should learn from the growth of the church in the Roman Empire, is that God's Spirit can, just like Jesus says, God can raise children of Abraham out of the stones.
Yeah.
So I think on one hand, it is true that Orthodoxy in America, especially for a while with converts, will be a LARP. The real question is going to be, in some ways it's, okay, Orthodoxy in America, talk to me after you have 3 or 4 generations of that development. Because, one of the, right away, the early church had the church in Ephesus, the church in Corinth, the church in Laodicea. And the Orthodox sort of keep that tradition alive, because you sort of have churches within areas, and that's sort of within nations. And so that each church within a nation has its own spirit, in a sense. So, Richard Rollins said something about Orthodoxy in America, which was very ambitious, but at the same time, fairly true in terms of, talk to me in 200 years. But of course, we'll have to see. So I hold nothing against Orthodox converts in America, and imagining that as sort of a LARP, because that's all you got. That's all you can do. And but at the same time, I think it's helpful to recognize that it is a short time thing. But that's America for any Europeans. It's a short time thing.
Right. So, I don't know. Man, so many comments. Sure, human beings don't know, dogs do. I mean, kind of. So part of that gets at what I was trying to talk about with Barfield, is that I think for example, I think a lot of cradle Orthodox, and I mean, I've had conversations with Orthodox people about this, and I think they largely agree with me, but there's almost a degree in which cradle Orthodox people who've just been thoroughly ensconced in that tradition, have grown up with it, have loved it and embraced it. They don't, they're in, I was talking about this earlier, in like an original participation. They don't know anything else. In a way, they can't have the fullness of the Tim Shell he mayest of choosing it, because they haven't fallen away from it. So this dance that we're doing between the individual and the person, and like freedom, and what is freedom, like these are questions as old as time, but I think we're working that out right now. And like, that's where this is happening, I think, is in the West a little bit. And so, so in that sense, like I would say dogs know in like an original participatory kind of a way, but they don't know in the kind of way that I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different thing.
A lot of people, freak out about deconstruction and deconversion. Now, I'm not going to say that for some people isn't a path to hell.
Yeah, for sure.
But for many people, it is a process from original participation towards final participation.
Yeah.
because it is a process of making it their own. Now, those who can, let's say, return back to their native church, let's call it, certainly have an advantage. I know from how many conversations with people around the world that, when they say to me things like, I just can't get my mind around the resurrection. Yeah, I get that. And I, in some ways, don't have that problem because I can't remember a time in which the resurrection wasn't a part of my worldview. So, but yet there is a view of the resurrection, and you see this with converts. Converts have a particular zeal, a particular knowledge that cradle Christians don't, and so there's trade-offs on both sides, and I think this is where God calls us, and we're finally His, and He, hate to quote Romans 9, but what does the pot have to say to the potter?
Yes. I really want to encourage you to watch that thing with Jordan Daniel Wood, because he talks about it in a technical. You've heard me say all my things about that. I watched your sermon, by the way.
The sermon or the Sunday school class?
The Sunday school class, I guess. Yeah. I should watch the sermon too, but yeah, Nate said this. So like even the resurrection, this is what I would, without going down the Calvinism track, but the resurrection is one of those things that I think you can believe. You can believe in a saint, like as I would believe the creed, and this is what I was saying in the last live stream, as a symbol of the faith. It is this simultaneously emanating and emerging thing. So like, and it's fundamentally mystical, because like what the creed is doing is being like, not here, and like leaving a little bit of a fuzzy middle. And so, because like you could unpack the Chalcedonian Nicene Creed forever, and you could write about it forever in the same way people do with the scriptures. And so it's being careful not to hem in those things, because like even what the creed says about the resurrection, he was, crucified under Pontius Pilate, suffered and was buried, and the third day he rose again according to the scriptures. That's not a lot of the ways that people want to talk technically about the resurrection is not in there. So like, what does Jesus's actual resurrection look like? What is a spiritual body versus a physical body? Eating fish, appearing and disappearing in the, like, that's all stuff where like, I'm just like, I don't pretend like I understand that in a simple kind of apologetics kind of a way.
Yeah. I really liked the conversation that Nate hosted on his channel with Jordan Daniel Wood and others about the resurrection. I thought it was a good conversation. The resurrection, C.S. Lewis talks about real things. This is part of the reason he eventually went for Christianity instead of a Hindu religion, was real things scale. And so the resurrection is apprehendable at the most basic level with the women outside the tomb.
Yeah.
But it's also cosmic renovation that can't be reduced just to the physical departure from, one GPS coordinate. And that's where, these most real things then have a gravitational pull that tends to restructure everything around them. And that's the resurrection.
Yeah.
And so, you're right in that we can't spend, what the Apostle Paul says about angels with respect to the gospel, epithumia in Greek tends to be a negative word often with Paul. It's over desire. It's succumbing to our desires. But then he has this interesting phrase where he uses it of the angels. And this is how they feel about the gospel. The angels can't stop looking at it in a sense. And this week I'm preaching on Colossians 2 about, which is the end of Colossians 1 going into Colossians 2, which is an incredible passage. And I'm really racking my brain how to communicate this to the dear saints at Living Stones who aren't particularly esoteric. They're fairly straightforward people. But this cosmic Christ that inhabits the world, and how Jesus basically colonizes the principalities and powers. And this is what we've seen in history since the resurrection, that Jesus has slowly been colonizing the principalities and powers. When Eric Weinstein was having his conversation with Ross Douthat about, I think Jesus would get memed to death. And it's like, you don't understand. Jesus has been owning the memes for 2,000 years. And even the other religions via secularity have been so impacted by Jesus and by the resurrection that if you have eyes to see, you can really see how, in fact, the resurrection has been retooling the principalities and powers for 2,000 years. Now, it's not complete, but that process is well underway, and it's going to reach a culmination. So,
yeah.
But again, if I talk like this, to people in church, they know me and they trust me, and so they'll just kind of do this. But one of the most important parts of Sunday is the Freddie and Paul show. If Nancy's there, when Nancy gives her sermon review, because it's super important, because I get to hear what Nancy heard. And usually it's, it's tremendously humbling as a preacher, because it's like, I didn't communicate at all.
Maybe Nancy speaks my language.
Well,
maybe I could talk and Nancy would just like
ball shows out there to see. But this is where, the sacramentalists have a real point in the Eucharist.
Yeah.
That, someone who is not terribly mystical, not terribly esoteric, very basic, an unsophisticated Christian, let's say, which should by no means be any kind of slight against anyone, they appropriate Christ via the sacrament directly. And it's all us thinky talky, big frontal lobe people that sort of, have this mess.
Yeah. Somebody was asking what Larping is, which I barely know, so I'm putting it in here.
Well, LARPing
Jason,
is until you make it.
Would I be allowed to speak at your church, Paul?
Oh gosh, I don't know that my church would have any concept of what to do with you, Luke.
I don't know that I've ever been allowed to speak at any church. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I had the thought the other day, and I sent it to Sam. He never responded to it or got back to me, but I was like, maybe the truest American Christian expression is the charismatic Pentecostals, the kind of like, what is, if I try to really think about, true American culture and true American music, and stuff that we're doing, like there's some kind of bluegrass music, blues. We have a lot of entertainment and musical things, but then like with church, I don't know, I equate kind of the South Appalachia snake handling charismatic movement as being kind of like a strictly American phenomenon. But
well, I think that's right. I've been reading this American Nations book, which has been really interesting. Mark Lefebvre recommended it to me, and it's been a fascinating
Navigating
book.
Patterns.
Navigating
like
Patterns.
And subscribe.
Approved by Matthew Peugeot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you're right in that, in many ways, Pentecostalism, I think, is America's contribution to world Christianity. And it arose. What's really interesting about that is that America was, in the 18th century and 19th century, the most, with possible exception of Germany, the most modern country. And Pentecostalism is just an FU in the face of modernity. It just isn't taking anything from modernity in some ways.
Well, and so like this comment, I want to get your thoughts on this, because this is my buddy Jason and Cal. He and Cal and I talk a lot, and Cal's been meditating on this about Jason, because Jason's background is more kind of like Pentecostal, charismatic, and to the point of what he's just saying in this comment, Cal will often say like the kind of Pentecostals or charismatics are almost like fundamentalists that are like going out to Walmart and trying to do faith healings and getting people to walk. Like those people believe it. Like they're just not sitting around in white towers talking about it, and they maybe, and like even your thing on Bethel, not Bethel, but and praying for the baby, and like it didn't happen, but there's something, that kind of super radical faith. I mean, I resonate with it. Like that's back in my like Way of the Master street evangelism days.
Yeah.
Like I'm that guy. So
no, that's right. And it's very American, and it's certainly Christian. It's like all so in some ways Christ plays in 10,000 places, but he's in some ways like this Horcrux that is distributed, and it's only at moments in time. I love this vision that I got from Keller, who got it from one of his teachers at Gordon Conwell, of what happens in revival is sort of with Voltron, all the lions come together, and it's liturgical, it's sacramental, it's Pentecostal, it's all of the things of Christianity sort of merge together, and that's when the church just takes this great leap forward. And it's incredible the way the Spirit has decided to manage the church in time. That's how the church grows, and I think that's connected to me with what Lewis says about life in this age. When I read the Gospels, I hear that this current age can't fully contain Christ. And so we see parts, and he continues to conquer, but it's not until the next age that, in a sense, things really come together. Now, what God will do with all of that, none of us can know or articulate, but that. And so when you ask, what is kind of authentic American Christianity? Well, Pentecostalism. But of course, Christ has been weaving his church together, started with, obviously, with the fabric of Israel, and then wove the Greco-Roman culture in. And every time Christianity goes into a new place, you can look, select areas, you can go back through this. There was puppy action. Every time Christianity crosses a new cultural boundary, it starts to conquer. But yet all of this is still very much in process.
Right. And it has to conquer, and maybe it conquers by force initially, but then we all have to get to that point of freedom where we, the he mayest, all the way down to the person, where like for that to be full or real or completely actualized, the Christ in me, like I have to acquiesce or submit or agree to that. That's part of what the fullness of that thing is, I think. Yeah. Well, okay. What else? We got comments. I appreciate, sounds like PVK should talk to Chris Green about Pentecostalism. That would be a fun one. Have you talked to Chris yet?
I haven't talked to Chris yet, no. I mean, this puppy just sort of ran a truck through my through my channel.
Yeah, your content has gone down. I was waiting. Sometimes I know that you sometimes Sam is the true American Christian. Sometimes I know that you'll release your podcast on Apple or something like that. So then sometimes in the morning while I'm making coffee, I'll look to see if the podcast form is out first. But just this puppy, he's ruining our community, really.
Well, and it's really, it's really about the wife. I mean, this was her project, and I got to support the wife. It's what you know that.
I do. The only reason that I've done 2 live streams is because my kids are at school and my wife is out of town. So that's why I'm doing that right now. But I should probably go soon because I should go be doing other things too. Because if I don't do some of the things that I'm supposed to be doing, and then she's like, "Oh, what do you spend your time on?" And then she finds out I did like
Who are you
multi-hour
talking with
live
those
streams.
randos on the internet?
Yeah, exactly.
We don't think about the Roman Empire. We think about randos.
Yeah, there's something, I don't know. We were talking about this too recently because I've been doing more thinking about this little corner of the internet and what it is and what I've been doing, paying attention to this for like the last however long it's been, 5 years, and it's this ongoing discussion. I brought this up in Estuary, and contrary to what all this means, like I used to be kind of Luddite inclined. And I still have those inclinations. Like I'm strongly considering getting a dumb phone because when I get a new phone, and just trying to integrate more of this into my life. Like the way that I always illustrate it is my wife and I talk about these Venn diagrams of life and where we have all these circles and we need to bring those together because sometimes it can feel like you can't have a circle that's way over here that is taking up a lot of your time or else it just becomes impractical or inefficient, and so you got to integrate a lot of these things, whether it's kids and school and their activities and church and work. You got to bring these things together, or like online little corner life. If that becomes an increasingly big thing and it's not somehow integrated into all the other circles, like it doesn't work. And so I don't know exactly what this is. I don't know what it means for me going forward. I'm going to be an empty nester in 6 years. Like what should I do? What are these? Do I have skills? What are skills? What is this? I don't want to do chemistry. I know that. So.
Well, it's interesting how right from the start, a big part of this movement has been about men. And some of the first, sorry, ladies, I'm not excluding you in any way, but some of the first Jordan Peterson meetups I did were men saying, I need somebody to talk about this stuff with, and I can't find anyone. And that, of course, the internet is perfectly tailored for that. Another thing I've been thinking about lately, even though, I'm not moving away from any of the things that I said. I talk about the priority of in-person, et cetera, et cetera. The church also has, somebody mentioned earlier, so the Catholic faith sort of has the, it's not national, which is a super helpful aspect of the Catholic faith, whereas the other, and so what the church is always trying to do are transcend these borders in a healthy way. And I think perhaps in some way the internet and this little corner is an expression of transcendence. We are deeply ecumenical, I think, in the healthiest way that I've ever participated in. We are deeply missional in, again, I think the healthiest way I've ever participated in. And so, we, all of us thinky talky people, we do the thinky talky stuff because we're trying to wrap our minds around the real things that we're experiencing. And so I think this little corner is a very real thing. And I think it's good to have those. Yeah, I can't spend all my time with randos on the internet. I have to keep priority for local church, local estuary, local friends. But this also has a place and is an important thing. And depending on where people are at in terms of what they have locally. I mean, here's Sam.
Hello. There you are.
Depending, and I think Sam's a great example of this because, I mean, anybody's a stakeholder in this corner, it's Sam. But Sam has struggles with.
What is the deal?
I love how Sam is just like telling us to pause. He's just like, you guys don't speak while I figure this out.
Sorry, my headphones weren't plugged in.
But
Anyway.
I think Sam, is a great example of, I think, what we all are in some ways, because I started making videos because I needed something more than what I was getting locally. And that isn't to say anything about the saints at Living Stones, but I do different things than they do, and I need that. And so this affords us a degree of transcendence, and I think it's good.
I like that you call the people in your church saints.
They are. That's what the New Testament calls them.
I like that.
They're a messy bunch, but they're saints. And that's why, the Freddie and Paul show is sometimes just absolutely unwatchable, which is why Rick brought the 10-minute hourglass in. But it's a vital part of the channel because, again, a whole bunch of us need to make sense with all this stuff up here, but they are all working it out on the ground, very real way. And
the unbearable lightness of being. You got to have that levity. You got to have that silliness. You got to have the, whatever. Because that's true. You guys know that about me. I like the playfulness. I like the silliness. Like if it's all just straight, it starts to feel like, I don't know, borderline. Sorry, forgive me for this term, but borderline autistic. If it's just like too intellectual all the time, it's I start to feel like we're just like AI, philosophy, theology robots, that are just trying to figure this stuff out. And I'm just like, can we have fun? And also, like, the whole randos thing, the whole thing with your channel, it's the personal stories, it's the testimonies. That's the heart of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just the thought group. That's a question in our local estuary, because we've had some people come in who are not really familiar with this little corner, and then they just show up in the estuary, and there's a lot of in-speak, and there's a lot of context they don't get, and then they're just like, and that's because that's something where I'm trying to figure out in the local estuary. It's just like, what is this? Because for me, and back to the Men's Illumin conference, like I value that. I value that very deep, transparent, heart kind of conversation stuff. Like that to me is essential, and it's really important. Like that's a circle of my Venn diagram that I definitely want to increasingly pay attention to. The merely thinky talky stuff I don't really care about, Like I want to talk to people that I've had ongoing relationship with, and like I love talking about Sam about the Trinity and whatever, because we've have such a long history and context that a lot of the conversations that we can have about that intellectually I can't have with other people. But yet I also like talking to you because I know you and I know aspects about your life, and we've become friends, and so that's a huge part of that.
At my council meeting, one of the elders basically, named the elephant in the room at Living Stones, and she's like, when are we going to talk about the fact that we don't know if we're going to be around 3 years from now? It's like, and so then they kind of trotted out some ideas that church members always trot out when they want to rescue the church from decline, and none of which work and probably shouldn't be tried. And so then I said, well, there's one thing that I think we could try, which would be very appropriate to everything, which would be the Sunday school class. For as much as I love it and as much as the people who show up love it, is, has 3 to 5 people in there and isn't necessarily getting us, isn't exactly missional in the kind of way we probably need it to be right now. So what we're talking about is having at 9 a.m. estuary every week before. So worship is at 11, and then estuary would be at 9 o'clock. And I don't know how that's going to go. That's going to be really interesting to see. On one hand, 9 o'clock on a Sunday is kind of a prime time for a lot of midtown young yuppie types.
That's yoga class.
That's yoga class. That's exactly right. So I'm going to go head to head with yoga.
That's what you're doing in church anyhow, right? It's yoga. And that's what yoga means, right?
So
Integrating
it'll be interesting to see the way that experiment. I have our estuary meeting tonight at Livingstone's, and really looking forward to it. Every time we do it, it's just like, wow, this really works. This is amazing. Keep talking. I got to get the dog.
Yeah, Sam.
What
brought you in?
Your message, but
oh, that thing.
We had a record number of people at the Chicago Estuary meeting last week.
Which is
15, I think it was. That's really it's starting to get at that point, it's hard to have one group discussion. Hi, puppy. I'm not supposed to like you because you're making it harder for Paul to make videos.
Yeah. I hate you, puppy.
You are pretty cute, though.
She's very cute.
No, I had a yellow lab growing up. I still have a soft spot for labs. I'm mostly not a dog person anymore, but you
can't have a dog at your house, Sam, so that when I come and visit, I can stay with you.
Right. I'm allergic to dogs too. If you're allergic to dogs, yeah.
Yes, dog allergy people.
And there's just some weird thing in our culture about dogs at the moment that's getting a little out of hand, I think. But that doesn't mean that there isn't that they're more valuable than people. They're baby replacements for too many people. And my town is just having the biggest argument ever, and it's not over I don't know, LGBTQ stuff or culture war stuff. It's over whether or not we should have the park next to the elementary school be a dog park or a people park. And that is bringing up feelings that people did not know that they had in themselves.
Wow.
Because some people are like, oh man, my dog would never hurt anybody. It can be next to the elementary school. My dog is this perfect, wonderful Rousseauian, farting rainbows thing. And then other people are like, kids are more valuable than dogs. We should kill all the dogs before any human gets harmed. What are you doing? Putting it right next to the elementary school. Yeah.
There was a disagreement and it got dialed up to an 11. It's the same 2 years ago used to say often.
This disagreement, because it's puppy feelings versus baby feelings, and that's a really strong source of disagreement.
And you can't do both of them together. There's no neutrality because the dogs can potentially bite the children, and the children will step in the poop.
I don't want to reveal which side I'm on. I am an elected school board member, so I have to have some amount of neutrality and perspective. But this is the biggest thing that the school board's dealing with at the moment is the dog park.
And truth be told, dog parks are all dogs behaving badly. Part part of the agreement with this puppy is no dog parks.
Oh man, one of my beefs with pets is it's not so much the service animal thing. If it's a legit service animal, I can understand that, but it's the emotional support animals that people get to like take into airports and on airplanes and into like every store in the world, and they try and they get awfully litigious or threaten being litigious if you say like, if you had the courage to maybe say like, maybe you don't have the right to bring your dog everywhere.
Room here.
And that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Well, Sam, you know, see how good of a politician you are. See if Hank wants to elect you to a higher body.
Hank will be my political promo man. Did we figure out whether Western converts to Orthodoxy are LARPing? What is that, Paul?
I don't know. The puppy found it in my son's stuff. It's kind of a shark.
Is it a cat? A shark
I think
hat?
it's a hat. I think it's a shark hat. So
I think you should, keep wearing it.
That will definitely, it helps with the LARPing theme. I don't know. It somehow looks like a LARPing wizard hat.
you know, the Pope hat is a fish head.
Oh man.
Rick showed me that one.
I think we decided that everyone's LARPing.
Well, what is LARPing?
Live action role play.
Yeah, exactly. But what like before we say that Orthodoxy is LARPing, what is LARPing?
I think to some degree, I think another way you could just say it is fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah, but like LARPing, they're not expecting to become a wizard.
You right.
Maybe.
Maybe they are. I don't know. I mean, I've never been deep into the LARPing.
Wait a minute. This is why I joined the church. Is that not the end?
We don't get to become wizards?
I thought
the New Testament language is you put on Christ.
Yeah.
And there's an element of there's something of LARPing in that. You put on Christ. And that's putting on a mask, putting on vestments,
playing a role.
Yeah, playing a role.
You could almost say it's like when C.S. Lewis talks about, you know, acting like you love someone. If you don't love someone, start acting like you love them, and then you'll find yourself that eventually you will love them. I think it's like that. It's behaving in a way that, you know, somewhat what it is a subsidiary focal integration. It's Michael Polanyi. It's
focal integration.
Classic TLC thinky talky move there.
But it's like, I think it's the habitual learning of any practice by attention and focus. And so like you act in certain ways, and then those things become habitual and you build neural networks, and then you subconsciously act those ways. It's like saying a prayer over and over and over, the Jesus prayer, and then pretty soon you're doing it unconsciously and you're praying without ceasing.
But LARPing, so there's an element of mutually agreed upon pretend, right, in LARPing, where it's, as Vervaeke says, serious play, although maybe it's not even serious. I actually don't like serious play. That's not my favorite Vervaekeism. But
serious not serious play.
But there's something about LARPing where everyone knows it's not real, but is agreeing to act as if it's real.
But don't you think part of that though is the balance of becoming and being, or it's like it's playing house when you're a little kid? Yeah.
And then, but there's a question of like, why is it that adults are doing this playing with each other? And like this sort of weird extended juvenilization of humanity or something like that. Like, yeah, I play with my kids all the time, and you know, it doesn't take very much to set up a pretend world with them. They almost do it just like automatically. But like when people are LARPing or going to Comic-Con or something like that, no one thinks Spider-Man exists or that you can become Spider-Man or whoever. There's sort of like this self-acknowledged gap between what you're doing and what could actually be real.
But don't you think that's kind of changing? I mean, we have furries.
Yeah, it is supposedly getting weirder. So maybe it's the Orthodox are just furries. I mean, Paul currently has a shark hat on, so make it that what you will.
Oh man.
No fur here. Sharks don't have fur.
Yeah.
You convert to Eastern Orthodoxy and start to grow a beard and long hair and change your name to Vladimir to make it right. Yeah, I mean,
that's what I was talking about with like the romanticism and the fetishization of whatever strand of Orthodoxy you're coming out of, which isn't what American Orthodoxy is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of that is like we're figuring that out.
Because if you're converting to American Orthodoxy, you probably shouldn't get Vladimir as a name. You should get like George or William or John or something like that. And like,
or Muhammad, Sam, you ethnocentric.
Yeah. Well, I mean ethnocentric. That's part of what I'm saying is that each of the different branches of Orthodoxy are ethnocentric, and that it's a little bit weird to convert to Russian Orthodoxy in your nice, cozy American suburb and suddenly think that your name is Vladimir. Like that is kind of LARPy in a way that I think is not like going to lead to an integrated self. They let you guys have cameras. I'm beginning to question YouTube's quality control standards.
Jed, I love you. Now I need 2 compliments from you so that I feel better about myself.
Even Roarcore bishops are speaking out against this. Well, I'm not quite
changing your name to Vladimir, I think. So like for me, for example, that's what I did with my priest, because you could come into the church and just be like, well, what's your baptismal name? Which, you know, if you don't have a Christian name or something, you could do a little bit. But then my priest was like, how about we go with Luke? You know.
And do you get to pick your own name when you go through this process?
Now we're talking.
There's something weird about self-naming that is sort of related to like trans questions also. And like trans could also be brought up of, is trans a LARP? You know,
right.
Are you LARPing as the other gender? And like
Sam, you're so much fun to talk to. You light up my life.
Basically, Orthodox is trans, is I think what we figured out.
Orthodoxy is trans, and Orthodox are furry trans.
Furry trans, yeah.
I think that I'll just jump to the end of where my intuition goes, and then we can work our way back, which is the white stone name is self-naming. Self. Puppy.
Explain what you mean by that. So do we get to pick our white stone name?
Yeah, but
hasn't our white stone name been written since like, you know, before the foundation of the world or something?
Yes.
Huh, yeah. And so we'll eventually become the person who would pick the thing that was always true of us or something?
It's like, so again, I'm going to pump and promote that Jordan Daniel Wood one combo in 4 parts, but he talks about this particularly in the 3rd one when they're talking about determinism and Calvinism and Arminianism and freedom and free will and what all those means. And it's this contrast and this binary between the ability to choose or the ability to do otherwise. What is he? I'm going to look up, because he sets this up as a contrast of these 2 different things. And I made the comment, so didn't I? Dang it. But essentially, yeah, it's the idea is that it's not, we all know at the end, like in the final analysis or in heaven or whatever, there isn't the freedom to choose contrary to your own good. You know, like we're not gonna be murdering each other in heaven. Jesus doesn't have that freedom. So like when you choose in the end, when you choose your real name, you'll just see it for what it always was,
No,
which is
okay,
what you
all
always
right.
were.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah, that
Yeah, Sherry.
in our fully theosified will, we pick the name for us that's always been true. Grail Country left a long link. If God is going to deify everyone anyway, why not deify everyone immediately? Who said God was going to deify everyone? Remember, I'm still an annihilationist over here. You gotta get deified or you can't last forever. That's why that's what.
Also, that conversation is really great on universalism and why it's.
Yeah, I should probably talk to Jordan Daniel Wood about that. One nice thing about having Jordan Daniel Wood on his on your channel is that his videos have a long tail time.
What's that mean?
Like a lot of videos, I bet Paul knows what I'm talking about. You know, like 3-4 days, and then they plateau, and then like maybe like 1 view a week or something after that. Because your regular committed excited listeners listen to it, and then it's basically done. But then some videos have a perennial shelf life. And what's weird about my Jordan Daniel Wood videos is like they have this like constant slope of viewership over time. It's not
like he's talking at a deeper level that
like
applies to more than just
speed of books instead of YouTube.
Yeah.
Because authors, my Tom Holland videos are the same.
Huh.
Not the ones that Tom Holland is on, because books work at a different speed than videos.
Yeah.
How about my conversations with you guys? What's their
blowing up? I'm making bank off you, Luke. Bank.
The high peak, quick plateau because they're very. This little corner of the internet is all over them, but then they move on to the next thing.
But no one else cares. Okay. I should go. And do you have? I don't think anyone else has privileges, do you?
I should get to work anyway.
Okay. And Paul's got a puppy.
But what is America? I still want to talk to Richard Rollin about what is America, but I don't.
He would be a great person to talk to about it. It's an ongoing question I don't have. It's the way I would probably summarize it, and I was talking about this earlier in here, it's the vanguard of the evolution of consciousness in the person. And I mean, and it's where we're figuring out that balance of what we were just talking about. Who am I? So, what do I want? What is my name?
It's part of being an American. Only Americans think that we're at the vanguard of the center of the evolution of consciousness. But we do think that. Sorry, I mean, Canada. This isn't you get to contribute sometimes, kind of. But
Canada's in it. It's the West. It's not even like it's not American exceptionalism. And like, I mean, you know, like I'm not
all
a fan
about American
of the military
exceptionalism. You don't need to be a fan of the military-industrial complex to be an American exceptionalist. Yeah, I think that the essence of American exceptionalism is this idea that like America has some unique relationship with the instantiation of progress. And so even the people who think that, oh man, I'm so enlightened that I realize the evils of the military-industrial complex, I'm going to end the military-industrial complex by instantiating the good moral progress in America that gets rid of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, we might have to fully embrace that Christianity. Somebody said earlier, like I guess Dave Bentley Hart said it, like something like Christianity has never made it to America. Yeah. We might have to embrace the fullness of that whole seed going into the earth and dying to embrace the fullness of what we are.
There's so much interesting about America's story. It's so Exodus-like in a lot of ways. I mean, the symbolism of crossing an ocean from the old world to the new world, right? That's, you know, it's like Exodus, it's like baptism, it's like going through the Red Sea. You know, the fact that we even use old world and new world is like a very New Testament interesting sort of language. You know, there's so much interesting about America's story and self-identity that sometimes I think we forget, and we forget to give ourselves credit for.
I mean, we are the new Israel, right?
Obviously, duh. Not like in a British Israelism sense. That was a weird way of answering that question. Or a Mormon sense. But I would love to talk to Richard Rollin about this stuff. And Pajot is not the right person to have the conversation of what is America about.
Oh.
Because Canadians, I'm sorry, Canadians. I think Sherry's out there listening. I'm sorry, Canadians. You just have a little chip on your shoulder when it comes to this topic that is a little bit hard to, is the only nation with no national identity because it's not a people. And there's, in this way, the project of America necessarily mirrors the church. I think that there's something very right about that. That because America is somehow ethnicless and it borrowed that idea of being ethnicless from Christianity, and that's another deep, interesting part of this whole thing. So, and there's
we gotta figure out some way to maintain it. I mean, it's all unity and multiplicity without like turning it into a nothingless liberalism monolith.
You might say e pluribus unum or something like that. Out of many, one. Right? America's always been aware of this fact of itself, that it's like trying to do unity in some sort of weird kind of way. But anyway, I think that America's super fascinating. I've been reading the Little House on the Prairie books with my kids, the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, which are way better than I thought that they were. Yeah, South Dakota. Like, South Dakota never seemed more interesting and dramatic than it does in these books. I mostly thought South Dakota was just boring, but apparently it can be fascinating. Have you ever been in a whiteout, Luke, where it is so windy and snowy that you can't see anything?
Yeah. Do you not listen to my stories of my childhood that I tell you?
No. All right. Well, tell me about being in a whiteout.
You need a new channel, Luke Stories of Childhood.
So it's it's definitely a phenomenon. So the thing that's different, I mean, people talk about Minnesota and it being cold, and it is, particularly when you get in northern Minnesota. But the difference with Minnesota and South Dakota, or North Dakota for that matter, is that you get in the middle of winter when it's -50, you get 50-mile-an-hour winds, and there's no trees.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's essentially what happens.
Snow is just being like, it's like a sandblaster,
right. So you have super cold snow, which is like sand. I mean, it's not big, fluffy, wet stuff. And then you get a 50-mile-an-hour wind that just blows. So like the story I'll tell you is there was one time I was going to school with my brother, and this would happen regularly. And I lived 7 miles outside of my town of 800 people.
So you are from Little House on the Prairie. This is you.
Yeah. Like I always tell people, I grew up where Kevin Costner's Outpost was in Dances with Wolves. Like that was filmed 15 minutes from my house, probably. That's like what it looked like out my front door. You couldn't see a house from my house. And so we were driving to town, and we had a 1979 98 Oldsmobile, which had a 402 in it. It was awesome. It was a big,
and you wonder what America is? This is America driving around South Dakota in an Oldsmobile with an engine that is way bigger than it has any right to be. You know,
right? And this was like in the 90s. It was a 79. My parents bought it. I grew up really poor. My parents bought it as the family car when it had 200,000 miles. Every one of the kids drove it. I drove it up until I bought my first car. I don't know. It probably had over 400,000 miles on it, and we abused it too.
And it worked.
So it was awesome. So we were driving to town in the middle of winter one day, and what happens in that kind of weather is you get these giant like snow drifts that can get like 30 foot high. Like they'll cover a barn. We used to like tunnel into them and build like snow caves and stuff. But we would be going to town, and so the snow would blow over the road, and you'd get all these drifts, just periodic drifts, and you'd try to get up enough momentum in between the drifts on the gravel so that you could hit the drift and blow through it and try to make it to school, you know? And one day, though, it was a particularly bad day. I don't know. We always used to joke because our superintendent smoked that like he'd cancel school only if he couldn't light his cigarette with a blowtorch. And we were going to school one day, and I couldn't drive yet, and my brother was driving, even though you can drive when you're 14 in South Dakota. And we got stuck somehow. You know, it was rear wheel drive and the drift was too big and we got stuck. And so then he takes off to the nearest house, neighbor house, which is probably a couple miles away, just running out along. And you have to learn, you have to follow fence lines because you can get lost in a whiteout. Like if it's blowing, you go out there and you have no idea your orientation, you can't see anything.
And then you just wander out into the prairie and freeze to death.
Yep. Yeah. And so he was running the fence line, you know, probably with not nearly enough clothes because it gets real cold too. And somehow made it, but he must have called back to my parents' house because then my dad eventually comes with a tractor and he's just like scooping out the car and dragging it home, you know, through the snow drifts. But yeah, it was a regular occurrence.
That's what dads are. That's what dads do.
Yeah. My dad was hard. Like he used to have we had a open cab tractor and he used to have to go roll out bales and feed and calve during all that all winter long. I mean, it's hard country even now. You know, it's the West. So it's my story of whiteouts.
There, at least we figured out what America is. I mean, it can snow in Chicago, and it can blizzard and snow a couple feet in a day, but I've never been in a whiteout. Like when I'm reading this book, I'm like, I've never experienced that. So
yeah, it's quite a phenomenon. I mean, there's a lot of, it's a weird place. You know, I was always weird there. As I've said many times, my dad used to say, "Who sired you, boy?" Because I was a weirdo growing up there, if you can imagine. But then going back, like I went back for my 20th high school reunion, and it was weird. I hadn't been back in 15 years.
What was it like?
Oh, man.
Go shovel the walk. I want to talk about Owen Barfield.
I wasn't doing that then.
Well, you were doing it. What you were doing, whatever was pre-Owen Barfield.
Yeah, I was doing something. So yeah, I mean, you fly into Rapid City, which Rapid City's a small town. I don't know, it has 80,000 people or something on the like big city in the Black Hills, where Mount Rushmore is, Sturgis Bike Rally. And then I got in a car and I drove to my hometown, which is like 90 miles east of there, north of the Badlands. And it's such a weird phenomenon. It's like a ghost town. It's like there's no one there because there barely is. I mean, it's just a tiny little town and there's nothing around it. Like if you drove north of my hometown, like there's nothing until you get to North Dakota. Like there's nothing up there. There's not even towns or anything hardly. It's the kind of place where like having frequent, like you can run out of gas because like there's not frequent gas stations everywhere. There's just nothing. And then culturally, it's just a lot weirder, you know, like, and there's a lot of like old school kind of masculine bravado, you know, it's just very Wyoming, Western South Dakota, Montana, small town, middle America, you know, and I come back like, you know, from big city, Minneapolis, like wearing my custom made fanny pack with like a pink shirt on probably. And they're all just like, oh, here he is, big city man.
Getting a head shaken.
Yeah. And well, it wasn't even that, you know, and then they're just like, there's stuff. I'll tell you more offline stuff. There were some pretty hard things that happened too there, but anyhow, it was interesting. It's fun to see people. It was a weird experience. It took me a long time to process it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a high school reunion every morning when I go to drop off my girls at kindergarten. You know, about
all the same people.
About a third of the parents are, you know, old classmates or siblings of classmates or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's how it is. Like there, a lot of my class still lives there or lives close by, you know, basically, or at most they like move to the really big city to Sioux Falls or something or Rapid. But outside of that, I think probably like me and my best man are like the only people that moved further or one, you know, some of the few. So it's funny. That's what I've always felt in between two worlds because I'm wired the way that I'm wired. I like going Barfield. I like intellectual conversations. I've gone to school, but I'm very, my upbringing and history and family is all very, very less than blue collar, almost.
No call.
Now you're talking to randos on the internet. See what that leads to?
I know. The super Paul, I called you in the last live stream. I called you the super hot it girl because I was talking about the origins of Randos United and how we had to all start talking to ourselves because the hot girl was too busy to talk to us.
Well, that's why the puppy is sent from God so that y'all don't become too dependent on me. That's why I'll never be the leader Jacob wants me to be.
Oh no. Has Jacob really? So I haven't talked to Jacob in a long time, but I haven't seen him around. He's left us behind, right? He couldn't co-opt us for his political stopping World War III.
His attention is slightly off, but it's not gone. He's still Jacob being Jacob, does his, Hebrew Bible study, and will be back in the center of his focus of attention soon enough.
Exactly.
He can't quit us.
He can't. You'd be surprised how many people circle around and come back. You see it in the comment section all the time. We're a hard habit to break.
It's true. I think because it is hard. It's hard to find community like this. Like if I wanna have conversations and tell people what I really think, because I have that phenomenon happen or that experience where I'll start a conversation with somebody and I can tell pretty quick where I'm just like, you don't really want to know what I think about this. like you don't want me to give you my honest opinions.
I think
we're like family. We don't want to know either, but we still listen.
I think part of what the difficulty with my last church was not even just Trinity things, but like it's hard for me to communicate theologically at the level that I want to with people outside the little corner of the internet. And and I think I just sounded really weird. And can combine that with the Trinity thing. And like, it was just hard for me to say like what I wanted to say without sounding, just like a complete fish out of water. And so that just like raises a bunch of low openness red flags in, the sorts of people who tend to be on the elder board of churches and that sort of thing. So I don't think it was just Trinity stuff. I think it was also all of this weird sort of whatever you want to call it.
Confessionalism. Well, institutions.
That was a good video. You guys, that was a great video. I love that video. And I want to try to figure out how to weave that video into my denominational stuff because what you guys talked about, my denomination has to really think about and ponder because it's not just you two.
No.
It's all over the place. And, that's part of why I'm excited about trying estuary on Sunday morning, followed by worship, is I sort of think that's the proper process. I think that's where the curious, you start with. So I mentioned briefly in the video I did on the Holy Post, this piece where someone basically does a quick review of the de-churching video and says, all this thinky talky stuff, it's all about belonging. And belonging is first. Believing and behaving follow belonging, but how the church deals with those three is super hard.
Here you go, Paul. This is part 1 of that Jordan Daniel Wood talk.
Oh, okay.
Because he talks about this stuff too in a way that's technical and more read and better than I can. I mean, you've heard all the stuff I have to say many times, but
I mean, Sam's difficulties just haunt me, and it's, and I wind up with all these very conservative people in the Christian Reformed Church who sort of want to really hammer the confessional subscription thing. But the irony is that many of them aren't cradle CRC people, which is super interesting.
Eastern Rite evangelicals, the
I mean,
Dutch Rite evangelicals.
Well, it is that, I mean, we've already talked about this, but that's the way that you can transcend being an ethnic church. A way, I'm not saying the way, a way that you can transcend being an ethnic church is to be very propositionally focused. And that's what attracts people to it. Is like, I think those people got it right. That resonates with me. I'm going to go over with them. And that does work to some degree. But you're kicking up against the goads of your residual Dutchness and your wooden shoes and that sort of thing.
Maybe that's why, because I have, this, I won't name them because they very much want to be off the internet people, but they come to Living Stones, and he kind of took me to task. He says, you really got to work a lot harder on this confessionality thing in terms of, because they don't fit into any box, but they're at Living Stones every week, and they're working the belonging aspect, and confessionally, they're not close. But Living Stones in many ways doesn't care. I mean, it's like when the one deacon was like, can't we make Rick a deacon? I said, he's got to be baptized first. I mean, I'm really flexible, but I'm not going to have a deacon in the church who isn't baptized. So Rick, if you're listening, let's get you baptized, man. We can do this. We're not Orthodox. We're Protestants. I'll get it done fast.
And I mean, well, another thing about the CRC is you guys have really long confessions. It's not like a 10 bullet point list. You got these like things from Dort and other weird Dutch Belgian names that I can't remember and pronounce off the top of my head.
Guido de Bray.
That are like pages and pages and pages and chapters long worth of confessions. And like, when's the last time that was sort of like gone through? It
would destroy the church.
You're right. And a lot of it, I'm sure, was, a bunch of well-meaning Dutch people in the 17th century best attempt at being eternally relevant. But it's hard to be eternally relevant. And I'm sure a lot of it doesn't make contextual sense anymore. Probably some stuff about relationship to Catholicism or all sorts of, church state questions or all sorts of things. The detestable Anabaptists, even though you're surrounded by Anabaptists, and that doesn't mean what it used to mean. And like all of that sort of thing is, and I've said this, I say this in the comment section about once a week, but I think that the real thing is hell. I think that the real test and the real confessional question, and Luke loves this question, of course, will be the question of hell, and is actually the church a way of saving you and you're altering your eternal destiny, or is it a social construction project for the present age only?
Well, this is my 3 causes that I listed again in the Holy Post video. You've got liberationist social justice people, you've got conservative social justice people, and you have evangelical salvationism. And these are sort of the 3 causes right now that are both broadly in the culture and in the church. And these are the tensions, because many people have multiple, some even all 3. I probably have all 3, but it all depends on the order that you stack them with respect to the question, what is church? Mm-hmm. I was thinking about doing a video on that today, especially with respect to Russell Brand. But I haven't done a Russell Brand video yet.
Luke, what do you think of all the Russell Brand business? Because I know in general you kind of like Russell Brand.
Yeah, I do. I think as far as the allegations,
or all of it, any of it, pick your slice of pie.
I like it when Luke's wife goes away for work.
I like like what he's trying to do with his project politically and globally, and being free and speaking truth to power, however you want to say it, follow the money, I think is great. I mean, a lot of that stuff that I think he's talking about is spot on. You know, I think it's really interesting. I guess RFK talked about this, but like, this is on YouTube, who cares? But Blackstone, State Street, and all those, like, going to be owning 60% of the single family homes in America in 6 years. Like, that's probably an important thing for people to know.
When it crashes, they'll sell out.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that will all play out, but it's just, that stuff's interesting. The allegations, I mean, it seems, no doubt, the dude did. I think he's a good guy largely, even back when he was being a bad boy. Like, that guy was still in there. He was an addict. He was in a lot of pain. I mean, he's talked about those things. He was just a sex addict.
You can't have that sort of throughput without having done some pretty allegation-worthy
Yeah, for
stuff.
sure. So, like, at some point in there with drugs and that much sex, I'm sure he did some questionable at best things, you know, like, what's the detail of all of it? You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
It definitely seems like he's trying to be silenced in some regard. But,
that's
you
the
know,
thing
like,
that seems the weirdest to me, is like just the sudden coordinated use of these things, like, because they were true the whole time, and obviously, and there we still have no, I don't know, sense of forgiveness or redemption in our current court of public opinion. But what seems really creepy to me is that it was so blatantly obvious that this is some sort of hit job of someone trying to get rid of him, that either the person calling the hit and the apparatus that's able to do the hitting is getting sloppy at showing itself, or it's so confident in itself that it doesn't care about being revealed. And that either of those two things are a little scary. And like that, it can ask the UK government, who's currently mostly controlled by conservatives, to just like, hey, send an email to Rumble and ask them to take him down. You know, like how does that even happen? Like, does George Soros just like pick up the phone and like, you know, like call some room of people and tell them to do this? Like, it's so, but something like that, you know, whether or not it's George Soros, I have no idea, but something like that is happening, and it's weird.
I think they're trying to, if all that stuff is true and whatever's going on, they're trying. Yeah, I don't think they even care at this point if they get found out, because it's probably inevitable. And if there's going to be a collapse, which there will, I mean, it's Babel. You can't centralize stuff to a certain degree without it collapsing. I mean, that's just what happens. And so if it is going to collapse and it's going to be some sort of global economic collapse, they're probably just, you know, eking out as much as they can. You got to silent dissenters, you know. And also, you shouldn't rape women. So that's my hot take.
Glad we put that in the video, because it was unclear for a minute.
And okay, so let's say no rapist should be allowed to have a YouTube channel.
Right.
So, and by
how about mobsters? How about murderers?
Okay, how about the Taliban? Okay, and should no one even accused of rape, even credibly accused but not yet convicted, should be allowed to have a YouTube channel? Is there a statute of limitations? Is there a blackout period? Is there a path back to having a YouTube channel?
Right.
You know, like the connection between, okay, Russell Brand did awful things in the mid to late 2000s, therefore Rumble needs to take him down now. Like that's not an obvious thing at all. You know, so like,
and the BBC didn't feel any pressure when he was doing it.
Right. And the fact that we kind of just let that pass, like, oh, well, maybe if enough of these accusations were credible, he should be demonetized. Like, that is not an obvious connection in any case.
And what's with the demonetization thing? Why didn't YouTube just take him down?
Right.
You know, So Alex Jones gets taken down. We're just going to demonetize you. So
Listen, that's the blunt tool of mammon. That's what you got. Take away the money.
it's the kind of talk to get Grizz to join. But Grizz got to be careful because Grizz doesn't want to get demonetized because, at 1,100 subs and 200 views per video, boy, he's raking in the AdSense like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, it's got to be just dollars. So many individual dollars per video.
That's right. That's
I
right.
don't know. This feels
$5 per 1,000 views. Let's say
this feels like a serious question from Grizz, but I don't know. I don't know anything about
says,
this.
"Buy me a coffee." That's really what it is. He's making a Starbucks a week. Poor Grizz. There's so many commercials on Brizz's. There's so much branding on Brizz's. I just zip now to like 2/3 through to finally get the sermon like a good Protestant, and then
There you go.
I skip the
You don't
singing,
need all that mind control.
skip the collection. That's what I do with Grizz's channel.
What in the world is the connection between the 2012 Olympic ceremony and Russell Brand? Where even were the 2012 Olympics? Was that in London?
It's a pop quiz.
Yes, 2012 was in London.
Come on, Sam. Can't you see? It's obvious.
Was Russell Brand in the 2012 Olympic ceremony? Did he have some role in the 2012 London Olympics? Does having a YouTube channel equal having a voice?
Don't
Casual
you remember that
symbolism, that
ceremony in London? That have not watched enough Grim Grizz.
There was something about the Industrial Revolution, and then the Bean played that Chariots of Fire song, and there was the Queen parachuting down, but that's all I got.
There you go. You're on the right track.
I don't know what that has to do with the current Russell Brand situation.
For those who have eyes to see.
I think the only solution to that level of corruption is non-participation. I mean, it's a hidden life. Like,
but we're currently broadcasting on YouTube. Does that count as participation or not?
Well, that's probably what he means by pushing the narrative. I don't know. You brought it up. I don't. This is why I'm an anarchist. I don't like to participate in politics.
You're an anarchist now too?
I was the original anarchist. I was talking about anarchism before Nate was.
Oh.
Okay. I have to go.
All right. I have to talk to Thomas in 15 minutes.
Thomas?
I don't know how he's going to be in the German festival, Breakwater Festival. And I did a conversation with him already on the channel. Okay. And he's had to cancel twice because he's doing chemo, and boy, I really feel for him. And I don't know how the conversation's. I'm going to try and do this conversation. I'm hoping my son wakes up and can keep an eye on the dog, because this is what the conversation is going to be. This is what the conversation is going to be like. So, I mean, and I won't do a randos conversation like this because there's too many holy moments in a randos conversation where people are opening their soul, and I got to watch the dog. So,
all right. Well, thank you both for jumping in.
All right. It's always great to see you guys. I miss you guys.
Same. All right. That's it, folks. We done.
All right.